Hi, Sam here from Roberts Geospatial. We're now up to, I think, part 5 of my Coorabulka vegetation study using ProRaster Scientific. So if you're still watching, well, I salute you. Your sacrifice will not go unremarked. So let's look at our results. We'll just look at the videos. So firstly, just mosaic. So we start in the 9th of July. We get some, the story is basically the station is continuously drying out through to Christmas, although you can see that there's a number of local cloud events and maybe get some light rain. And then there's Christmas, and then you see the flood start to come down both the Georgina and the Diamantina river systems. And then there seems to be another minor flood. And then you can see another large pulse coming down in mid-March through to mid-April. And from that point on, interesting cloud formation there. Did you see that shadow pop through? And I think we're now at the end. So from that second pulse right through to the end of the series, it's just a... I guess it's not summer, and so we're seeing the vegetation maintain itself over that period. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the collated mosaic. So maybe we'll see that a little bit more clearly. So we start in July, and now, of course, we're not seeing the cloud, although we're still seeing these sort of artifacts from the cloud because the masking, as we spoke before, is not perfect. We're slowly drying out. You can see it's getting drier and drier. We're heading towards the end of the year now, and now you can see the first flood coming down in January, a minor flood in February, and then now in March through to April, the second major flood, and now just that ongoing story of vegetation just continuing to develop. So let me take that out. Let's see now the video of the vegetation index, and now we're clipped to the station boundary itself. So here's our desert land on the right. Here's our channel country on the left. You see the channel country is slowly drying out. So where it's kind of greeny or bluey, that means we've got consumable vegetation. Where it's yellow or brown, I'm assuming that vegetation is so sparse that it's of no value. We've had our first flood event. Notice we've got some green in the desert areas. And then the second flood event comes through and actually covers up the vegetation that was developed as a result of the first flood event. So the grazier might have been thinking, damn it, he thought he was onto a good thing, and then it just keeps going. So let's just take a closer look now at the statistics. So we'll go to my data here. We'll do this one. Go into the statistics. So we'll look at the histogram. So here's the date up here, July 9th. So looking at this histogram, you can see there's one major peak. Now, and most of the data is in that peak. And that's the desert country that's out to the east. It's centered around 0.15. Most people would say that anything below 0.2, which is sort of more here, is sparse or unvegetated country. So it's either bare ground or it's very sparsely vegetated. So that's what we're looking at with this peak. It's very sparse vegetation, possibly of very little or no value to the grazier in terms of feeding his cattle. But out here to the right, you see this minor peak. This is the channel country returning a signal, and there we're getting values peaked around 0.6 in the vegetation index, and so that's indicating that that's a good vegetation. So let's skip forward, and as we skip forward you'll see that it jumps around a little bit, but that's just the total distribution, not the actual peak. But the peak, the vegetation peak out to the right, which represents the channel country, is contracting and disappearing, and it's really starting to pull right back in to the central peak, which represents our desert country. We're getting now into December, and now we're at the end of December, where we know that we've got that big cloud event, and now the flood is on its way. And here we are in early January, and you can see a peak now out to the left. That's the flood. That's the actual response from the water in the channel country, showing up as a very negative value in the vegetation index. Remember that the vegetation index is computed over the whole station, so it's not just confined to areas where there's vegetation. We get signal from everywhere, including from the water. And that lasts for a couple of cycles and then starts to disappear. And now you can see that it's fattening up in our main peak a little bit, and we're beginning to develop another peak out here, which is the vegetation growing as a result of the first flood. But now we've got the second flood, and you can see that it took out some of the vegetation again, and subdued the vegetation for a while. Now it's making its way back again, and now growth is really accelerated, and we're getting a really pronounced peak out here, quite high. We're up around 0.65 now, so that's good. So that's good feed for stock, and that continues right through, although it starts to decline again right towards the end of the series in mid-July, and of course out there that's midwinter. So we also computed the statistics for that clipped. So we took out everything below 0.15. So here's our desert area, and it's been largely clipped out. So if we and keep an eye on this curve. This is the cumulative histogram curve. When it's flat, that indicates we've got more data out here to the right-hand side, which is our healthy vegetation. And when it's steep, that indicates that that we don't have much vegetation to speak of at all. And as we click through from July, coming through to summer and Christmas of 2022, you can see that it progressively steepens up. Now, it looks as though we're getting more volume under the curve, but remember that that's actually a bit of a furphy. The number of samples that are being returned is continuously decreasing. So we had like 2.6 million at the beginning. By the time we get to Christmas, we've got under 1 million samples actually returning valid values. So now we have a steep curve, and now it's starting to flatten out again. We've had our first flood. We're now into March. We've had our second flood now. And as the vegetation starts to really take off in May and June, you can see we have this very pronounced peak out here, and we've got quite a flat cumulative histogram curve, and that continues out through to the end of the series at the end of July.